we'd just like to, if your indulgence, just open the Development Assessment Committee for Wednesday, the 10th of October. We have two councillors who are absent, Councillor Dudzik and also Councillor Minari, just so they can be please noted as apologies. As with councils, moving on to point 3, this meeting will be recorded in accordance with council's meeting procedure and also stream live stream rather. Confirmation of minutes, councillors. Confirmation of the minutes for the September 21 DAC meeting. Somebody move. Move Councillor Edwards. Seconded Councillor Berry. I'll put the ayes in favour. It's carried. Thank you. Were there any matters arising from those minutes, councillors? No. Okay. Any disclosure of conflicts of interest on the business paper here tonight, councillors or officers? Okay. Thank you. Moving on to the first item, item 7.1. We have two speakers to this particular item, councillors. Mr James Isles, who is an objector, and Mr Steve Collier. I'm not quite sure if Mr Collier is for or against. Okay. These were sort of ones, these gentlemen registered but didn't sort of came in a bit later, and so we're allowing them to speak to this item. So Mr Isles, do you want to come forward first, please, and speak to this item 7.1?
Well, thank you. Just a couple of matters I would just like to bring to attention. The advertising notice that was placed on the site and sent to adjoining landowners clearly states that the application was only for development and use of a childcare centre, and there was no mention of a medical centre on that particular notice. So that's just something I'd like to bring attention to. Obviously, that's just given an indication that it was only for a childcare centre, but not for a medical centre. So that may have some implications on other people in the community that may not have had the opportunity to put an objection in. Just in regards to the application itself, clearly indicates on the plans that there are to be 5 practitioner rooms. I see on the agenda item tonight that it can only be up to 3 practitioners. My concern is that if it's allowing 5 practitioners in that particular development, that may cause a reduction of car parking. The report clearly states that the car parking meets the provisions of the planning scheme, but if we're going to look at 5 practitioners, that makes a shortfall of 6 car spaces. So that's again just something I need, or just needs to be clarified from that perspective. Another issue is the car parking associated with the hotel. Obviously a subdivision occurred some time ago which created this lot, and there doesn't seem to be enough area at the back. Obviously that may have been considered as part of the 2-lot subdivision. The issue there is obviously, is there enough overflow for car parking associated with the existing hotel? The other matter obviously I'd like just to bring attention to is loading and unloading. From that perspective, obviously there needs to be some supplies, etc., that need to be associated with the childcare centre and also the medical centre. Doesn't seem to be any designation on the plans for where loading and unloading will occur for those 2 uses on that site. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you, Mr Isles. Are there any questions of Mr Isles, councillors? Okay. Yes, thank you, Mr Isles. If you could please resume. Councillor Ward has a question of staff. Councillor Ward, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. I just want to clarify, I note in the briefing papers we were given, it clearly articulated that no more than 3 medical practitioners permitted to practice at any one point in time. Is that correct? Subsequent?
Another question, please, Councillor Ward.
Can we please clarify the advertising, and did that include the medical centre or not?
Mr Phillips.
Through the Chair, the advertising did go out saying that it was for a childcare centre. It didn't have the medical centre on it. However, all the documentation that was available with the plan showed that there was a medical centre on the site.
Okay, thank you, Mr Phillips. Any other questions of officers? Councillor Ward, please.
One of the other concerns raised by the Speaker was the loading and unloading. Now, again, according to the notes, it says that designated loading areas shall be shown on layout plans. Has there been consideration given to where they shall be?
Mr Phillips.
Through the chair, so it would be something that they would need to provide to us at a later date.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of officers on this? Thank you. Next speaker is Mr Collier. Mr Steve Collier, please. You wish to come forward? And just turn the microphone on if you could, please, Mr Collier. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, Mayor, councillors and Council Executive. My name is Stephen Calero. I'm from G2 Urban Planning. We're the project consulting town planners for the application. I'm here on behalf of our client, the permit applicant. Thank you for the opportunity to address the committee. We read the officer's report and we fully endorse the officer's recommendation to the committee. Our client and the project team has committed itself to working closely with council officers to achieve the outcome that is before the committee this evening. This has included pre-application discussions with senior officers of council's town planning department and post-lodgement discussions, meetings and negotiations with council officers. The proposal has been modified significantly during the application process in direct response to council's comments and recommendations. The proposed buildings are single storey in scale and, notwithstanding the commercial zoning of the land, are designed to have a residential appearance in order to sit comfortably within the Steiglitz Street streetscape and to engage directly with the street. Vehicle access is limited to one crossover with the requisite number of on-site parking spaces for each of the proposed users, provided in compliance with the requirements of the planning scheme. Our client and the project team participated in a consultative meeting with residents and council officers to ensure that resident concerns were heard and appropriately responded to in a respectful manner. In particular, objections based on economic competition with other similar centres are not a valid town planning consideration. The childcare centre does not back onto the pub located in the main street of the town, and its operating hours do not conflict with the main hours of the hotel. The current condition of Steiglitz Street and the need for an upgrade is something that we understand council is investigating as part of upgrade works within the township, as advised by council staff at the time of the consultative meeting, and I think that's outlined in tonight's report as well. Potential noise impacts on immediate neighbours can be addressed by way of acoustic fencing and by means of conditions on the permit. And finally, in response to concerns about car parking, as has been pointed out, the proposal includes requisite number of on-site car parking spaces for the proposed users in compliance with the planning scheme. We believe that the project represents a valuable contribution to the Bland Township, its community and the wider community of Birrabul Shire. The proposed childcare centre and medical centre will add to the services and functions that the Bland Town Centre currently offers and will contribute to the town centre becoming a greater focus for the needs of the local and wider community. I'm instructed by my client that a highly experienced operator has already been secured for the childcare centre, and that pending the grant of a planning permit and subsequently a building permit, construction will commence as soon as is practicable. We thank the committee again for the opportunity to make this brief submission and request that the committee endorse the officer's recommendation tonight.
Thank you, Mr Collier. Any
much.
questions of Mr Collier, councillors? Okay. Thank you, Mr Collier. If you could please resume your seat.
Thank
the
you.
council will deliberate on this particular item, so thank you. Councillors, in your hands, there is a recommendation there commencing on page 6 and extending to page 9. If council is of a mind to proceed down that path, if you could just please note that in item 17C, where it says the last sentence, Moorabool Shire Council Engineering Services, that's actually redundant and just can be removed. So if you could just please note that. It just doubles up because it's covered in the item 17 itself. So just for your information. So councillors, I'm in your hands. Councillor Ward?
I'm happy to move it, Mr Mayor.
Move, councillor. Was there a seconder for that? Councillor Edwards?
Second, Mr Mayor.
Is there any opposition? I'll put that. All those in favour? Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Moving on to item 7.2, we have a speaker to this particular item. It's Mr Paul Yankos. Mr Yankos is representing Mr Rudick. So, Mr Yankos, if you could please come forward, please, and to the desk there, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor, and good evening to all. It's still daylight, but by time evening, I would imagine. To all councillors, thank you for being here. Now, I guess I'll
If you could just bring the microphone a bit closer to your face, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Sorry about that.
No, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll start firstly with there was a letter. There was some consultation going on with Travis Ferrari and Tom Tonkin for a good length of time, like 12th of April 21, and there was some objections that we had. It would have been addressed. It was something to sort out with Mr Ferrari's participation in them, and at this point there's things that weren't actually brought to fruition, and I might go straight to them. I haven't got the time of reading through that list, but council had them for a length of time. Now I'll go to part of the assessment part with the no access permitted to Geelong Balan Road. Now, that was one thing we'd asked about the construction phase. That property had a gate entrance from the Geelong Balan Road, and I think the timeline of when the court will come down and is a key factor for the continuation eventually. But during the construction phase, what we were saying, and there was more objectors than myself and Mildred, that we would like that to be continued. Now, I look at one thing here that there'll be no access from Geelong Balan Road. Yeah, that is correct. We're not asking for it in the continual stages. Once the stages are completed, we're not saying that should be an entrance forever. If council don't like it, don't agree with it, that's fine. But for the initial stage, to safeguard the amenity at Alexander Drive, at Crook Court, and all the surrounding properties there in Graham Street, Creek Court, they're going to be suffering because big equipment has to be brought in there. And we feel that if it was to come in through the other side, it'd take away a lot of the problems and probably relieve the problems in Crook Court at the minute. The entrance has always had a problem. Crook Court's hasn't been upgraded to heavy vehicle standards. The vehicle's a lot heavier now. So therefore, what we're saying, and that's what we were putting to Mr Ferrari, but evidently, if we go on and look further into this, and I'll, it's on 33 of the Town Planner's report about the proposals. We feel the amenity will be affected immediately. And also, I don't understand why council at one time or another, when we go back to the referrals, hasn't gone to the Department of Transport. Here it says no response, and I believe if that is a case in hand, when 28 days lapses, it could be effectively interpreted as, well, whatever we might say. There might be a yes or a no, because the referral authority should either put in a report to say that as an interim, because vehicles have also been, the house that's in there, there's a truck that was housed there which crosses over, and everything will be contained in that. But if I stick with the consent, I guess the question is, if Mr Ferrari, as I'd asked him to do and others at the meeting, was supposed to look into that and find out and make his case about that. And nobody's done that. Therefore, the consent from Vic Roads remains still. They are a referral authority. It remains unanswered. And what I'd like is to get the understanding if there was ever any type of correspondence, letter, email sent to the Department of Transport regarding the current entrance to be used on a temporary basis for the site entrances and for all their equipment. And I guess no one, I don't know the answer to that, but I know that they should have been consulted, and I believe that an authority would either agree to it or disagree to it or put conditions on it, be it to say, well, there's basically it says no consent. I don't know about that. What does that mean? To me, it means that if council determines that they can come in through the top, I guess, well, that's a fair call. And maybe that's what we should be achieving, because the other part of the factor here is that conditions are put on, but how are they going to be enforced? And in relation to tradies and other vehicles, storage, for instance, if those trailers come in, I don't know what sort of trailers can come, they will be using, but for instance, sometimes they'll be dropping the back trailer off, and that has to be on pretty level ground, so I guess that's going to be somewhere in that court. That court is for vehicles to move around in. Now, to me, it's use people, the custodians actually of our amenity. And for that, we think that at a later date, or if there's a timeline that someone can give me, when the court will come down, because my understanding is it's going to be pretty quick. And for that reason, I think that someone can put clarity on it. I'd appreciate it.
Mr Harris, we've sort of probably been more than generous the usual time for speakers, and I think the 2 points that you did raise were access from Geelong Road and enforcement of conditions. Is there anything else that you wish to raise or bring forward to council, please?
Not really. I think they're the key factors.
Yeah, well, that's what I've gathered from it. So, look, thank you. Any questions of Mr Yankos? Councillor Edwards, please. Okay. Any questions of Mr Yankos? Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr Yankos, and council will now discuss this matter, and obviously we'll move forward. So Councillor Edwards has a question of officers, I take it, and then Councillor Ward. So,
my first question is in relation to access from Geelong Road. I understand that that's the case for the final end state of the estate, that the access won't be there. What conditions do we have to protect Cook Court from heavy machinery, noting that we've had a lot of dramas with this over the journey? I imagine that large machinery could damage it. Do we have conditions, A, that they have to restore that road that we put in, or they could have access via Geelong Road to get the heavy machinery in there.
Mr Pazuna, Mr Phillish, please.
So through the chair, there's two conditions that are on there. Condition 15, which talks about notification and photographic evidence of the infrastructure where they're coming in from. And then that reinstatement has to be done at the end of it if that's required. And condition 17 has an environmental construction management plan which talks about where the vehicles are being parked, etc., while they're doing the development, and a lot of other things talk about the public safety of the site, etc.
Thanks, Mr Phillish.
Any other questions?
No, thank you, Mr.
Councillor Ward, please.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just noting one of the concerns raised by the objector. My understanding from reading the notes were that lots 1, 2 and 3 are joined Geelong Bland Road, but it does not create access from Geelong Bland Road. So in that case, I think that addresses that concern. Would that be right?
Yeah, through the chair, they don't have access, and access is prohibited. Yeah.
Okay, any other comments, councillors, or questions? Councillor, we have a motion, recommendation. I think we've received an updated recommendation rather, with a few additional points. So I'm up in your hands, councillors, and we'll probably be dealing with the updated one. Councillor Ward?
I'm happy to move it, Mr Mayor.
This is the one that... Yep, yes, okay. Councillor Secretary, please.
Yeah, I'll second it, just noting that there are a couple of additional...
That's what I just sort of noted that there. Any opposition, councillors? Councillor Tatchell, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Has the objector seen the additional items that have been put
Oh, I
on?
don't think so, because we only received this ourselves later this afternoon, Councillor
Would it
Tatchell.
be appropriate? Or?
I think it'd be appropriate to sort of...
Thanks,
the
Mr
copy was made available. Councillors, we have I understand circulated, but basically we now have entered the final stages of this. We have a mover and a second. Is there any dissent? I'll put that. All those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Thank you, councillors. Next item is item 7.3. We have Mr Quigley, who did sort of, I understand it, did make application to speak, and it sort of didn't sort of come through, but we'll grant him leave to speak. If Mr Quigley, if you want to come forward. This is in respect to item 7.3, variation of restricted covenant at 25 View Gully Road, Hopeton Park. Mr Quigley, please.
Oh, thank you all for having me here. Yeah, just want a bit more detail on my shed permit situation. Yeah, I've just been with the position of it's like 20, 30 metres off the road in the back corner. Yeah, it's not like, of course, it's in view of the road, but it's not obstructing anything. It's with the other sheds that are in the same spot, same corner. Yeah, like I'm not sort of changing the look of Hopeton Park in any way. There's plenty of other sheds of similar size and bigger, as we've said. Yeah, and it's just, I think we're sort of, you know, out of everyone, there's probably one person in the whole place that sort of isn't keen on that look, but yeah, it's just, yeah, just sort of getting held up once again. Just, yeah, sort of, obviously the money side of things just keeps getting more expensive the longer it sort of waits. Yeah, and with that too, it's not the shed that I sort of want to go with, but instead of having the normal industrial looking, if you will, I'm looking at going down maybe a sort of a barn style, which sort of brings down the left and right hand side of it down to 3.6 metre eaves, but obviously has the higher centre. That's not my ideal situation, but that's something I could probably look at doing. Yeah, and if that, it'll obviously go away from the big shed look, I guess, in the area, if that's what council was sort of trying to not do. Yeah, and just, you know, like I'm not really, yeah, it's not bringing harm to anyone. Yeah, there's other stuff in the area that, like the look of, you know, people putting up colorbond fences and that now, like, that's more changing the look than some of the sheds that are around. I don't like the look, but yet I'm not presenting myself to any of the council or writing letters to say, well, you know, I don't like it. It's just, there's times change, I guess. And it's pretty much all I've got to say. And
Thank you, Mr Quigley. Any questions of Mr Quigley? Councillor Tatchell, please.
Yeah, thanks, Mr Mayor. I've probably got questions for both officers. I mean, I understand the compromise in terms of a barn-style shed. You understand the real issue here is we've got an objector on a covenant, so our hands are tied a little. But in terms of this barn-style shed, you understand that I think at the last time this came up, we talked about there's no actual limit on the roof, the actual the peak of the roof. It's about a wall size. But there's also some issues in terms of the length, I understand. So if you had to because I think we're changing the shed totally, that's the problem, is that right?
yeah, well, sort of looking at dropping the length down a bit, so it wouldn't be 40 anymore, it'd be down to 36. Instead of 18, it'd be 15. And obviously the height sort of dropped a smidgen as well, because obviously there's a bit more of a pitch in the middle, but obviously the sides weren't as much of a pitch, so the overall was 5.3 to the very top. But yeah, mainly the side eaves were the 3.6, and yeah, so we sort of dropped the width of the shed as well.
You have another question,
Yeah,
Councillor Tatchell,
Mr.
please.
Mayor, so obviously this would need this will probably be the officers, so obviously this would need a whole new plan because it's a different design.
Well, is there any other questions of Mr Quigley from other councillors before, yeah, Councillor Berry, please? Then we can go to your question to the officers. Councillor Tatchell, please.
Thanks, Mr Mayor. Mr Quigley, I just, so with all these changes, have you spoken to the objector about these proposed changes?
No, well, we put forward to him a letter saying where would you like to be, and he apparently had no room for anything. So I'm not too sure whether putting this forward to him would change that. I'm not too sure. Maybe being a different look and it's a bit more farm-like, then it's possible, but I don't think it's been put forward to him that with a barn style. Like I said, it's not something I wanted to go down that road of changing the whole style, but if it's what I've got to do to get that the shed, then yeah, that's what I'll put forward.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions, Councillor Ward, please?
Mr Quigley, I just wanted to know, and Councillor Tatchell touched on this, I suppose I just want to understand, has the limitations of council's ability to approve applications that may not abide by a covenant been accurate or fully explained to you?
Well, yeah, I obviously didn't know the full covenant. I was just brought through that the covenant has been changed before for sheds of this size, from where my covenant is now to getting it extended. Yeah, like they said, it wasn't. They said it was a process, but yeah, you put your stuff forward, your shed plans, the letters, you pay your fees, and the covenant would be changed to suit.
Councillor Ward, supplementary question?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just in simple terms, and I'll just, there's only a couple of lines here. The responsible authority, which is council, this is from the Planning and Environment Act 1987, must not grant a permit which allows the removal or the variation of a restriction, which is a covenant, where a beneficiary will be unlikely to suffer a detriment of any kind, which is effectively an objector. Yep. So I suppose, in simple terms, if there is an objector, council can't approve that. I just wanted to clearly articulate, has that been explained to you?
No.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other questions of Mr Quigley? Thank you, Mr. You want to officers or sorry, to Mr Quigley?
Just cleared up because I think this will be still here at Easter. So if it's all right, I'll ask Mr.
Thank you.
Quigley a couple more questions. So I understand that you have a new design that you would have to come back to council for a permit. Do you also understand that, so the limitation on the covenant at the moment is 4 metres, and do you have a height on this barn to say what the centre would be?
5.3 would be the next eave height at the top. The overall height would be just a smidgen above that, with the pitch would be another 12.20 on top of that. So it's 7 metres to the very top.
Yes. so to be clear, right, just so, because you do realise when you do a barn, you'll have footings and posts.
Yeah, that was something I didn't really want to go down of having that. That's why we're going the other style shed, but
And I know we don't have a plan of it, but I suppose what I'm trying to do is help you. If you go to 4 metres and go to the same apex, that you'll actually alleviate that problem and you'll get more cubic metre space.
yeah, okay. Well, yeah, I'll have to, suss it out.
That's probably why we need to bring it back as a plan.
Yeah,
I'm just trying to avoid this dragging on for months and months
No,
when
point
obviously
taken.
the permit's an issue.
yeah,
But just for your consideration, I'm suggesting that if you hasten on this and you make a decision on the barn without exploring your options,
Yeah.
you might actually do yourself a disservice.
yeah,
So we're hamstrung, but what I'm suggesting that maybe have a talk to planning, stick with the original height, because there's no limitation on the apex.
Well, that's what he said. He goes, you could do that, say have the 4 metre eaves, but he goes, which would keep it under the covenant, but then he goes, then you'd have a pitch on it, which was, like a certain degree, and it'd look churchy, and I just didn't like that look.
No, well, I can't deal with the aesthetics. I'm just trying to.
Yeah,
I just want you to look at
understand that,
both.
but obviously, like, I've just sort of going for that, the look of it, I guess, I've got a green thumb, like, I want all the trees and everything, and I don't sort of want that pointy roof shed just sticking out of nowhere. Okay, you get your height and the rest of it, but it just, I just try, like, to have the wall size, keep it low. For me, it just looks silly the other way.
Mr. Mayor, if I could
Councillor Tatchell.
indulge, would it be appropriate to defer this item, let Mr. Quigley look at some different designs and then bring it back, so we don't have to go through a whole process again?
Well, I'm in council's hands, but I think if there's two matters, as I said. This application is to vary a covenant, and obviously, as Councillor Ward indicated quite rightly, there is a benefiting party to the covenant who's objected, and as such, council's hands are tied. I think Councillor Berry did ask Mr. Quigley whether he'd had a conversation with the objector, and those other ones that he cited, we don't know whether in fact they are on the same covenant or whether in fact the people they didn't get an objection. And I think it's also fair to say, even if this covenant were rejected, it would still have to go for a planning permit. Am I correct in saying that, Mr. Phillish?
Through the chair, thank you. Just make a couple of points. That is correct. I note this particular covenant refers to a shed no greater than 20 metres in length, 9 metres in width and 4 metres in height of the eaves. So if any of those provisions are changed, because at the moment we seem to be just focusing on the eaves as such, if any of those don't meet the covenant, then we have to go through the application process. We would have to get an amendment in process in relation to what's been proposed, because the proposal was for a 40-metre shed by 16 metres, so that's what's being considered at this point in time. And if officers were to recommend an approval, which we can't in this case, the conditions would be written around that. The other comment I can make is that I am aware the planning officer has spoken to the objector, and the objector has said at this stage that they wouldn't accept any changes to that covenant.
Okay.
But obviously nothing's been put to them as a formal design, etc. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Phillips. Councillors, I'm in your hands. Councillor Tatchell has indicated a deferral, but I think from what Mr. Phillips said, any of those three parameters that were referred to were to change, it would require a variation to the covenant. So I'm in your hands. Councillor Tatchell.
I'll withdraw the deferral because it'd be impossible to apply in this case.
Okay, thank you. Councillors, we've heard the comments from Mr. Quigley and the comments from our officers, and I'm in your hands. There's a recommendation there on page 47.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Edwards, please.
Unfortunately, I'll move the recommendation because we have no choice.
Yes.
It meets the statutory requirements. I have been up there, I have looked at it, and I do agree with what you said, but our hands are tied, so I'll move the recommendation,
Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
It is basically statutory. We're bound to do it. Seconded, Councillor Tatchell. Any dissent? Put that all those in favour? It's carried. Thank you. Mr. Quigley, I hope you understand the situation that councils find itself. I think that's spelled out in the report. that because of the nature of these covenants, any benefiting party who objects council cannot actually grant a permit for variation because of the fact that our hands are tied the way the legislation is framed. Yeah, so that's, and as Councillor Edwards just said, reluctantly, but I mean, we have no choice in the matter, so I hope you can understand that, and obviously your endeavours will sort of try some other thing. Whether you can talk to the objector, I don't know, but thank you very much for that, and thank you. Next item of business, councillors, is item 7.8. Any update on VCAT decisions? Mr. Bezuidenhout and Mr. Phillips, just for council's information.
Mr Mayor, no updates at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Councillor, is there any other business from officers or anyone? Councillor Edwards, do you have some other business, please?
Just have a question, if I may, Mr Mayor.
Certainly.
Just in relation to the hotel that was approved at Grant Street, have we had any further updates? What's happening there?
Is anyone able to respond to Councillor Edwards' question?
Through the chair, we haven't had any updates in relation to that. Obviously, the permit's been granted and the site appears to be vacant still.
Okay. Any other business, councillors? Officers? No? Okay. Thank you very much for your participation here tonight, and officers for their fulsome reports and the engagement of councils. Our next meeting will be, for the DAC meeting, will be the 16th of November 2022. How quickly the year goes. I'd like to close the meeting. Thank you very much, councillors, and everyone participating, and have a good evening. Thank you.